Governments always tell you, we are working for your financial freedom, stability, growth, and opportunities. Actually, these are their favorite words. But if you look closely at the truth, you'll find a much darker picture. Throughout history, governments have played secret financial games to empty ordinary people's pockets and concentrate wealth and power in their own hands. And the most surprising thing is that these games are not new. For centuries, they have been presented under different packages and names, but the goal has always been the same: to move money upward and make the majority dependent. Now, let's take a look at the oldest and simplest trick: inflation. When a government spends more than it can collect through taxes, it has two options. It can openly admit the truth and collect taxes directly from citizens, which is politically very risky, or it can quietly devalue its currency, reducing the value of every coin and banknote. Ancient Rome used this tactic skillfully. In the 3rd century AD, emperors struggling with military expenses began to reduce the silver content of the denarius. A coin that was once almost pure silver eventually became copper with a thin silver coating. The empire acted as if nothing had changed, but everyone holding that money paid the price. Inflation rose, savings eroded, and wages became insufficient. This was a silent tax on the people. A method still used today by central banks instead of imperial mints. In the Middle Ages, another version of this game emerged: forced loans. The kings of England, France, and Spain routinely compelled wealthy merchants and guilds to lend money. Of course, this was not voluntary. Refusing meant fines, property confiscation, or worse. Sometimes the crown promised repayment with interest, but these payments were usually late, in devalued money, or never made at all. While the government continued its wars and palaces, merchants had no choice but to hand over their capital. The trick here was to disguise coercion as patriotism or duty. And this trick worked for centuries. By the 17th century, the financial system itself had become a trick. When the Bank of England was founded in 1694, it certainly wasn't out of kindness. The government needed money to fight France. Wealthy investors bought government bonds, and in return were guaranteed interest payments financed by taxes. It might seem like a fair deal, but who was paying those taxes? Ordinary people, of course, through taxes added to products like salt, beer, and cloth. The wealthy lent money to the government and earned safe interest, while the poor paid more taxes to finance those interest payments. This was a wealth transfer system presented under the name of national finance, and it reinforced a pattern that still exists today. The safest investments in the world are lending to the government, and the returns are ultimately guaranteed by the labor and consumption of the masses. Now let's quickly look at the modern world. Tricks are everywhere. Take a look at open spending. Governments create massive debts, issue bonds, and sell them to investors, banks, or foreign powers. Politicians tell the public it's for infrastructure, jobs, or social programs. But a large part goes to defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and bailout packages. When it's time to pay, the government doesn't cut top spending. It raises taxes, devalues the currency, or reduces social benefits. And here's the trick. The debt appears to be for the people, but the burden falls on their shoulders, and the profit goes to bondholders. Now let's examine bailouts. In the 2008 financial crisis, banks made reckless bets, turned toxic mortgages into securities, and nearly collapsed the global economy. Who paid for it? Ordinary taxpayers through massive government rescue packages. Who profited? The same banks, now bigger and more powerful than before. The trick was simple: privatize gains, socialize losses, and convince the public it was necessary to save the system. Government retirement and Social Security programs are also a deception. For decades, people in the US, UK, and Europe have paid into state-run systems trusting that the money would be available in retirement. But most of the time, the government doesn't save that money. It spends it immediately and leaves IOUs in its place. What was promised is paid in the future by taxpayers. Essentially, it is an intergenerational Ponzi scheme dressed in official language. The system works until populations age, demographics shift, and the system becomes unsustainable. Then the government calls it reform, usually by cutting benefits, raising the retirement age, or reducing payment values. Do you notice the pattern in these tricks? At every stage, the trick relies on perception. Inflation is called growth, forced loans are duty, national debt is investment, bailouts are stability, and retirement cuts are reform. Language conceals the truth. Wealth is transferred from many to few from the bottom up. History shows that these tricks have worked for centuries because most people don't study economic history, don't understand financial systems, and never notice the traps until it's too late. In recent years, the tricks have become even more complex. Consider quantitative easing, a term few had heard before the 2008 crisis. Central banks created trillions of dollars to stabilize markets, buying government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Politicians and bankers told the public it was necessary to prevent a collapse, and it worked for the financial system. Asset prices soared. Stocks, real estate, and bonds increased in value. But who owned these assets? The wealthy. The average household saw little benefit if they had no major investments. The disadvantage was rising living costs and distorted markets. The trick is this: creating money saved the system for those at the top, while causing inflation and inequality for everyone else. Another modern trick is hidden taxes. Instead of raising income taxes directly, governments quietly tax through sales taxes, fuel taxes, and most importantly, inflation. If prices rise faster than wages, it acts as a hidden tax on savings and purchasing power. Governments love inflation because it reduces the real value of their debts, but it destroys financial freedom for citizens. Your salary may seem to rise nominally, but if costs outpace earnings, you're actually losing wealth. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the system itself. Inflation is one of the most consistent tricks governments use to shift the burden of spending without admitting it to the public. Then comes regulatory capture. Regulations appear to protect the public: financial rules, safety standards, consumer protections. But history repeatedly shows that powerful industries influence the regulators meant to oversee them. In the 19th century, it was railroads. In the 20th century, oil companies. Today, tech and finance. All shape rules in their favor. It's like Peaky Blinders learned in the streets of Birmingham. It's better to own the referee than play the game. Governments use regulations as a protective tool. But behind the scenes, the largest companies create loopholes that stifle competition and maintain profits. The public sees protection, insiders see profit. War financing is the modern face of an old trick. During World Wars I and II, governments issued massive bonds, telling citizens it was their patriotic duty to buy them. People believed they were supporting their nations, and they were. But these bonds were also safe and profitable investments for the wealthy, guaranteed by future taxes. The pattern persists in the 21st century. Trillions of dollars in debt financed the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Defense contractors, banks, and bondholders profited, while ordinary taxpayers footed the bill. The trick: wars are always presented as temporary emergencies, but the financial burden lasts for generations, even after soldiers return home. Governments also use complexity as a trick. Thousands of pages of tax laws, financial instruments, even professionals struggle to understand hidden line items and jargon-filled budgets. All create an environment where ordinary citizens cannot track how money flows. Complexity becomes camouflage. If you can't see how wealth moves, you can't fight it. In ancient Rome, devalued coins were the physical evidence of the trick. Today, it's hidden behind balance sheets, abbreviations, and hard-to-understand programs. The trick is the same. Make it complex enough that the public can't follow and the transfer continues unnoticed. Why is this important now? Because these tricks are still alive and accelerating. Inflation erodes your savings. Debt burdens increase every year. Bailouts are still the response when markets shake. Central banks manipulate the money supply. Governments shift costs to the public indirectly. The result is a system that makes you work harder for less real wealth while empowering financial elites. The lesson from history is not just that the tricks exist, but that they always return. When Rome devalued its coins, citizens suffered. When kings took forced loans, merchants lost wealth. When modern states create inflation and debt, households bear the burden. Different eras, same mechanism. And here is the bitter truth. Most people can never escape these tricks because they aren't even aware they are being played. They see inflation as natural, taxes as inevitable, bailouts as acts of mercy. They believe the government's message and ignore economic history. And that ignorance is the most powerful trick. If people forget the past, they cannot notice its repetition. That's why governments and elites prefer the public to remain financially uneducated. Financial education is resistance. Economic history is a weapon. Knowing the tricks makes it harder to manipulate you. So, what should you take away? First, look beyond the headlines. When governments announce incentives, ask who profits first. When inflation rises, remember it's not random. It's policy. When regulations are introduced, ask who wrote them and who benefits. Second, build real wealth outside the traps. Assets that maintain value even if currency loses worth. Third, never assume the system works for you just because they say it does. Systems protect themselves, not you. The financial tricks that impoverished Roman citizens are the same as those draining your bank account today, just dressed in modern language. The only difference is whether you notice them in time. If this gives you a new perspective, subscribe. History gives answers, and I'll show you where to look.